Zainab Zaeem-Sattar, back again with her infamous show, Breaking Stereotypes. Ladies and gentlemen, to all our listeners, it is wonderful to be back on the show. And this time, we're not back on the show in Ramadan, we're back all year round. And it's exciting. I am very, very excited. So for all of you who thought you had got rid of me, tough, I'm back. Deal with it. So today's show, which is my Breaking Stereotype show, we have Rumana Idris. Now, she is one of my mentees. As some of you already know, as a lawyer, I do mentor quite a few students at various universities in Leicester. I'm pretty sure we only have the two unis, but we've got Leicester Uni and De Montfort Uni, and Rumana is one of the young ladies who I have the pleasure of mentoring. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Rumana to introduce herself, but before she does, I would like to thank the team at Ramadan FM and all the guests and the listeners for tuning in and making this show happen, because without you all, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair and you wouldn't have to put up with me. There you go. So, Rumana, could you please introduce yourself for our listeners?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rumana and I'm from Derby. And currently I'm studying the legal practice course at De Montfort University in Leicester. And I'm also working as a student ambassador at De Montfort University as well, and just helping out students at open days and just any other events they need me at, really.
Okay, perfect. So when you say you're doing the legal practice course, that follows on from the law degree. So you're aspiring,
yes,
so you're aspiring to be a solicitor.
Yes.
Great. So that is how I know you, because you reached out in order to become mentored in your career on that.
Yeah, I reached out to Zainab during my undergraduate degree, and I just was really looking for a mentor, and just the amazing person she is. She really helped me out loads, applying for jobs, helping me with my CV, and looking for training contracts as well.
Thank you, listeners. If you're listening, I promise Rumana will give me the £10 later on when the show's over for all of those nice things that she said about me. Right, so in terms of you and your background, I understand, when you and I were talking and I was getting to learn about you and a bit more about you and on your CV, I came across this really unusual sport. Now, I say unusual because for me it is. I've never come across anybody who does this sport. I don't know any Muslim ladies until I met you, girls or, adults who actually do this sport. And I was quite in awe of this. So are you able to tell me exactly what sport it is that you do and how you got into it, please?
Mm-hmm. So the sport is fencing. And the way I got into it is when I was quite young, my dad, he was really into sports. And he just thought all his children should do sports. And me and my brother, he got my brother into the obvious sports, so like cricket and football. And with me, it was a bit more difficult. We weren't really sure which way I wanted to go. And because he did fencing, he just thought, you know what, you need to do fencing as well. So I tried it out. I really loved it. And just since the age of 12 years old, I've been fencing. So yeah, even now.
Okay, so before we explain to all the listeners what fencing is, you said that your father fenced as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Did he go to a club or anything here whilst he was learning how to fence? Where did he learn, basically?
Yeah, so he learned, I think, when he was younger, there were clubs in Nottingham where he's from, and he always used to fence there. And I think he got it from my granddad. So my granddad used to be in the army, and then he used to fence there. And then he learned it from my granddad and just picked it up, and then he carried it on, and then there's me.
So it's a generational thing then?
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's one good thing, that's really nice to continue on. So explain to us, or to me, what exactly is fencing?
Mm-hmm. So fencing's like a combat sport, and there's 3 separate swords in fencing. So there's foil, saber, and épée. So foil is the one that everyone really starts off learning first. It's the most graceful, and it's probably the one with the most rules as well. And if you know foil, you can fence all 3 swords. And playing foil just teaches you the foundations of fencing. With foil, you have a much smaller target area when you're hitting your opponent, and that's just your torso. And the way to get a point in fencing is to hit your opponent. So with foil, that's just the torso, and you have to use the tip of your sword and kind of press it into the target area. It's more like a stabbing motion.
Okay, so when you say torso, you're talking about the upper body, correct?
Yeah, the upper body, yeah.
So now I'm going to mention something here because I'm curious, then this is for my curiosity. is it anything like what we see in the movies and things like that, where you've got everyone doing all those graceful moves and they've got the swords and the tip of it touches the, your upper chest and that? Is it anything like that?
You know what? I think what you see in the movies is more Saber and epee. So those are the two other swords. So foil's kind of like the one that's the most controlled, the most graceful. It's the one you kind of start off learning. Then you've got Saber, and Saber has a slightly bigger target area. So that's your torso, your arms, and your head. And the way to get a point in Saber is by a slashing motion. So not a stabbing motion this time. And Saber is what you usually see in, like you said, the movies. So like I would say, off the top of my head, the Three Musketeers. So that's what you would see in that kind of movie.
I was thinking more Zorro, but okay, I'll take
Zorro.
I'll take Three Musketeers.
For Zorro, I'd say it's more epee. So epee for me, as like I'm a foilist, so I do the first one I mentioned. So epee, I think, to me as a foilist, just looks like a bit of a mess because all the rules are out the window, and you can hit any point, any point of your opponent's body really. And I think what you'd see in epee is, honestly, you can hit the toe, you'll get a point. You can hit their finger, you'll get a point. Honestly, anywhere, all rules are out the window. So I think you'll see that in, like you said, Zorro, and maybe you'll see if you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean. So Jack Sparrow type, that's what you'll see if you. I think the clearest version I can give of an epee is really.
Well, I don't want to make any enemies here, but I've not actually seen Pirates of the Caribbean. I know of Jack Sparrow. I've seen snippets of it, but it's just not a movie that's ever appealed to me. But I see where you're coming from. So it's very interesting because I always thought there was just that one weapon. I've never been able to tell the difference. So that's really interesting. Now, you've already mentioned to me that your father and his father and so on did the fencing. Are you going to be passing that on to later generations as well? Are you planning on continuing the line?
You know what? I think I definitely will. I think it's just such a unique sport that I've loved like every single day, like since I've been doing it. Obviously, for the last year, I haven't been doing it because my club's closed down at DMU and so is the one in Derby. But I definitely will carry it on myself once it opens. And I think, future generations as well.
Okay, so you mentioned the club at uni. I'm really sorry to hear that, because of the pandemic. Currently, it's not running. And it is, we are all in uncertain times and we're all learning and moving forward. And a lot of people, kudos to everyone who's stepped up and supported, one another in these uncertain times. But with your fencing sport, I want to just go a little bit back and say, well, your father got you into it because he wasn't too sure whether you should go into cricket or anything like that. Cricket for me is a very boring sport, and I know I'm going to make some enemies when I say that, but I used to do the scoring of cricket for about 8 years continuous every Saturday for the Leicester County Leagues, and no, I'm so sorry. I'm not doing that again. But in terms of you deciding you wanted to go for fencing, was there a club that you could join in Leicester where you could continue your passion?
Yeah, so because I fenced before, I definitely wanted to continue at university. So straight away, I think even before I started first year, when you get those open days, the first thing I did was go to kind of like the sports club marquee and ask, do you have fencing? Please tell me you have fencing. And they did. And they said it's been a long running club. It's always been there. So yes, as soon as I got into first year, I joined straight away and I've just loved it. The team's amazing and they're just so welcoming and wonderful as well.
So exactly how old were you when you started that particular club?
That club, I must have been 18, so straight away when I joined university.
Okay, and before that, when you were like a bit younger, was there a club that you could join? Say if I wanted my 12-year-old to join right now, she's not going to because I want her to be a pilot, and she'll probably, tell me off for saying that out loud. But if I wanted to put her in a sport similar to yours or to fencing, is there somewhere in Leicester or anywhere nearby?
Not too sure in Leicester, but in Derby there's definitely a club. Okay. And it's called Forward Again Fencing. It's pretty close to my area and they cater for anyone, all ages. So yeah, there's definitely clubs. I'm sure there would be one in Leicester as well.
Okay. Now, you then joined your university's club. Tell me a bit more about that.
So I joined the university's club, like I said, at 18. And when I got there, everyone was just so welcoming. And you know what? I was quite surprised. It's a really multicultural kind of team. Like, I won't lie to you, when I went to Derby's team, I was the only brown individual there. And then when I went to the DMU team, like it was really like a mix of everyone, which was so surprising. And another contrast to the Derby's team, there was only two females, so I was one of two. And then you go to the DMU team and you got three or four, which was like a big jump from what I used to. And then yeah, so it's male dominated, but it's a really good, nice, and friendly team.
Okay, so now I'm glad you mentioned about you being the only like, brown person, shall we say, Asian, because when I was doing my research into fencing, one of the things I did come across was that it was predominantly seen as a white elitist, and I don't like using the term white, so Caucasian, but it was more of that elitist sport where it was more exclusive to them and their kind and wasn't really open. But things are changing, aren't they now? Times are changing. You see a lot more females and a lot more Asians taking up into this sport. Have you seen a huge shift in the last few years?
I would definitely say there's like a lot more of a mix coming into fencing, but I wouldn't say it's more Asian, yeah, at all. I'd say I only know one other Asian fencer other than myself.
Okay, so basically we've still got a lot of work to do when it comes to trying to penetrate that
Yeah.
elitist sport.
I was
Okay.
gonna say I don't think it's we've got a lot of effort to do to penetrate. I think it's what it is that us as an Asian community don't really look at fencing as something to do. If we did, it would definitely be there as something we could do. But I don't think we kind of even look at fencing.
Okay, you've brought me really nicely. I think you're doing my job for me because you're literally just taking me into my next questions that I've planned and prepped. And one of my questions was, have you received any backlash from people in the community of the same faith? Now, given the fact that your family is a generational group of fencers, I'm assuming that your family members have all been okay. But what about people in the community or even distant relatives who probably don't know anything about fencing? Have you received any backlash from them?
I wouldn't say it's been a backlash. I just think they look at me as odd, or a bit weird, or just the one who's the black sheep, or just someone off the side. Like
Tomboy.
it's not one of the normal things you would see a Muslim girl in our society doing. So yeah, I was just seen as kind of like weird. Just stay away from that one kind of thing.
Yeah, I know
And
that feeling.
I think my mum, she was like the main one who didn't like it at first. Or she just thought it was strange. And then when she went with me to like one of my first training sessions when I started when I was 12, she saw the amount of males running around and one female, and she just kind of said, "Yeah, Rumana, let's walk back out. Come on, let's go." And I was like, "Mum, come on, let me try it. I really want to try it." So that was just something I think that really shocked her that she didn't approve of at first.
Yeah,
And then it was kind of like my dad who was encouraging, "Oh, don't worry, like it'll be fine,"
yeah,
kind of thing.
I can
Like,
imagine. Girls
she,
are normally are the babies of their
uh-huh,
fathers, aren't they?
yeah.
Mums are
I
more
think there was
practical.
just at one point she didn't even want to tell my family that I was doing fencing. She just kind of said to them, "Oh, Ramon's just going to do exercise." So, and I just found that hilarious. So every time
Bless
my
her.
family was like, "Oh, where are you going, Ramon?" I was like, "I'm going to do exercise."
I think your mum will get along really well with my mother because I think my mother's the same. I mean, when she found out that I motorbike, I mean, she found out from other people, and she still calls it a moped. And no disrespect to all the mopeders out there, but it's not a moped, it's a motorbike. Please call it a motorbike. So I imagine what you must have gone through as well. But so you said that your mum came with you and she saw a whole bunch of men first running,
Yeah.
and then she's like, right, let's go. Now, one of the things I've noticed about fencing and people who are fencers, the uniform, the attire that you have to wear is quite modest because your chest, your face, your neck, your sleeves, everything, your hands, it's all covered. So in terms of the gear that you have to wear and the moves you have to do, have you ever felt that it's clashed with your religion and any of your beliefs?
You know what? I don't think it has at all. I'll be honest with you. If anything, a few people have told me it's a sunnah. So with archery and horse riding, that is a really, really good thing to do. And because you said we're fully covered, so there's nothing at all I can think of that would, go against it. Just being seen as odd, really.
Okay.
Like I just get seen as weird. That's about it.
Well, yeah, aren't we all though in that one? So you said it's actually classed as a sunnah in the same lines of it being archery, and that's news to me. That's quite. I didn't realize that. So
Yeah, honestly, I didn't either. Someone just told me once, and they were like, "Oh, you do fencing? That's like so good. It's a sunnah." And I was like, "Really? I didn't know that."
wow, okay, I'm gonna have to look into it a little bit more then.
Yeah.
So is there a particular name for the gear that you wear? Is it
Yeah.
called anything?
hmm So I'll just tell you like that. There's not like one name, so I'll tell you the specific parts. So first you have the mask. And then that obviously that covers your face to make sure you don't get hit, and it covers your neck as well, which is quite vital. And then for women specifically, you have the chest guard, and that's kind of like a hard kind of bit that goes across. And then on top of that, you have the plaster on. Then on top of that, you have the fencing jacket, and then you have the glove just to cover the arm that you hold the sword with. Then you have your breeches, which is like the weird fencing trousers, the white ones that go up to your calf.
Okay.
And then under that, you have your long white socks that go up to the calf. And then if you're doing electric fencing, so electric fencing is, you know, when on the Olympics, you can see the beep go off when you hit your opponent.
I think so.
Yeah, that's electric fencing. So it kind of shows you that you've got a point against your opponent.
Wow. Okay.
And then that's when you wear the electric jacket on top. So it's like a foil jacket. So it's like a silvery metally jacket, and it's called a lame, and that's what you would wear on top of that. So you wear a lot of things. Honestly, in summer, you're like sweating afterwards.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I know all about the sweating element of it. I mean, listeners are going to probably think, what are they talking about? But I keep coming back to my motorbiking, and honestly, in the heat, when it's nice, beautiful heat, but you got your leathers on, and you got your gloves, and you got your helmet, you got your visor down. It is hot, you know. The good thing is when we're riding our motorbikes, we got the wind hitting us, so that kind of interacts and counteracts the summer breeze that we tend to get. Now, you mentioned that in your derby team, there was only 2 of you Muslim females. But then when you came to, am I correct? Was it Muslim females or just females?
No, it was just like, she wasn't Muslim now.
Okay, so females, right? So females. Yeah. But then when you came to the Leicester team, there was a lot more. Well, you know, one thing I'm really proud of for Leicester. I mean, I'm from up north. I'm a Boltoner, but I've been here for more than 21 odd years, and I'm really proud to say that Leicester is very, very multicultural. We are a very diverse city, and that is one thing I'm really, really proud of when it comes to living and breathing the Leicester air. So you mentioned that at uni there was quite a few diverse members. Now, do you know off the top of your head how many Muslim females were actually in your Leicester team?
Yeah, there was one more. There was one other one, yeah.
Okay, so 2 or 3?
Yeah, 2 of us, yeah.
2 of right, okay.
So I was one and she was the other one, so 2 of us.
Okay, so 2. So still not as big as one would hope, but better than before. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Now, have you faced any sort of issues from any of your team members about being Muslim and fencing?
No, not at all. You know what? It's not even been a factor. Like, we never really look at, oh, she's Muslim. It's, you know what, the team in De Montfort University were just so friendly and so welcoming. They were just happy we had more females. Like, they sometimes struggled to even make a team because of the amount of females they had. So you need 4 female members for the team. They would always have enough for the male team. They would never have enough for the female team. So at some point, if they would literally even ask me, just get some of your friends to join. Come on, we don't care if they're fenced before. We just need a full team.
Wow. Okay, I never realized, I've always taken advantage of certain sports, assuming that they would have more members than they can probably make teams. So this is quite interesting to know that actually there are some sports out there that don't make up enough numbers because there's just not enough people. And I guess that comes down to the very crux of what this show is all about. It's all about breaking down that stereotype. It's all about people having these assumptions that it's not a sport for girls or young ladies or even mature adults. It's not a sport for Muslim women. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to awareness, education, even marketing. How much marketing are these clubs actually doing when it comes to ranging out to a broad audience? Are they actually saying to people, we need X, Y, and Z? Or are they just, sometimes, how do I explain it? TV adverts and things like that. They do a lot of research into their audience, and they know exactly who their target audience is going to be. But to do that, the research and the money that's spent into it, I'm pretty sure, university clubs, small-time clubs, they can't do that. So it comes down to people like you, people like me, friends and family, raising awareness of such nature. So to you listeners out there, if you are listening, if you've just tuned in, this is Breaking Stereotypes with your host, Zainab Zaeem-Sattar on Ramadan FM, and we are with Rumana Idris, who is a fencer and a Muslim, and she is here to talk about how fencing is a sunnah. I've not looked into that, but that is something that she says. Fencing is something that Muslim women can do, and with the clothing that you have to wear, you are quite modest. So it's something that maybe some females should look into doing, whether you're Muslim or not. It's
Allahu Akbar!
bear with me. Something just screamed in my ear, which was the takbir and Allahu Akbar, which caught me off guard. So I do apologize, everyone. In terms of Rumana, going back to the fencing element, does the fencing, and I'm assuming does the fencing give you discipline and focus?
I think it definitely does. There's a lot of skills that I've learned from fencing. Discipline and focus is definitely like a few of them. I think I've also learned about thinking on your feet, and I have to say I've also learned about thinking ahead as well. So like you said, focus, discipline, thinking ahead, and thinking on your feet are all skills I've learned from fencing. And I think I use them pretty much every day.
Okay, brilliant. So when you say focus and discipline, before we move on to the next question, we've got one of your friends, Zahra Khan, who's joining us. She's also a Muslim fencer. So we're just going to bring her into the show, and then we'll carry on with all our questions, if that's okay. Well, we're just waiting for her to join in and get her audio going and everything. So this is where all the technical elements come into play. But my producer is working hard in the background to make sure that there's a smooth transition with my new guest.
Hello.
Hi, Assalamu alaikum. You all right, Zahra?
Walaikum salam. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are
Good,
you?
not bad, thank you. So let me just do a quick introduction to all our listeners out there. You are listening to Ramadan FM, Breaking Stereotypes with Zainab Zaeem-Sattar as your host. And we have been having a lovely conversation with Rumana Idris, who is a Darbanian, should I say? She's from Derby, but she's studying her LPC, her legal practice course at De Montfort University. And we now have her friend, so we are now joined by Zahra Khan, who also is a fencer, I'm presuming in the same club as Rumana. Is that correct, Zahra?
Yeah. So at university, I joined the fencing club, and that's where I met Rumana.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Jazakallah, thank you so much for joining us. So we were just talking about Romana's background, how she got into fencing and everything. So could you give us a bit more information about your background, who you are, how you got into fencing?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Birmingham, and the way I got into fencing was through my younger brother. So he's 2 years younger than me. And when he was starting secondary school, he was having like a tour around the school with my mom, and they seen a sign about a fencing club at the school. My mom was like, "Oh, that's quite interesting. Why don't you join that?" And he was a bit like, "Oh, I don't know." And she was like, "Oh, why don't you just try it?" So he tried it and he really enjoyed it. So he was doing it. And then while I was at school, I did the Duke of Edinburgh Award. I did the Bronze Duke of Edinburgh Award.
Yeah.
And as part of that, you have to do a sport. And I'm pretty hopeless at sports. I was never any good at sports. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do for a sport. And mom said, "Oh, why don't you go with your brother to fencing and give that a go?" So I said, "Okay, then I'll try that." And I was just intending to do it for how long I needed to do it to get my award. And I thought I'd just leave it after that. So I started going with my younger brother to fencing, because the guy that runs the club at his school also has a Birmingham fencing club. So I went to that one, so I went to the Birmingham fencing club and I started in that, and I really enjoyed it. So after I completed my Duke of Edinburgh, I carried on with it, and then at university I joined the university fencing club, and that's where I met Rumana.
Wow. So there's quite a contrast between both your parents. So Rumana was explaining to us earlier how her mum wasn't too keen on her being a fencer, and her mum, would make best friends with my mother, whereas your mother sounds a lot like my mother-in-law, where, she's quite open for us to take on new achievements and, achieve different things that other people don't. So it must be nice to have that kind of support there when you've got backing and you're not going to get into trouble or anything like that. That must be quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. It was very nice. She's always been very encouraging and always kind of gets me to try new things.
Okay.
And both my brothers are very kind of into sport, so she just thought it'd be good for me to get into a sport as well. So yeah, she's very encouraging.
So you said you were from Birmingham, and Romana's from Derby. Now she was saying that in one of the clubs in Derby there were not that many women there. What about Birmingham? So you said this gentleman that you joined his club, that had a club in Birmingham. Did they have a bit more women there, or was it just you?
So no, it wasn't just me. So when I started fencing, I was about 15. So I was part of the kids one because you had kids one and the adult one on different days, and there was probably about 3 or 4, maybe a few more around my age, but there was a few that were quite young, but there's about 2 girls that were around my age, so like teenagers, and then there's maybe 1 or 2 like younger girls, but it's still mostly boys.
Okay. And what about in the adult team? Do you know how many women were there in the adult team?
With the adults one, there's probably, including me, maybe 3 or 4, but they didn't come every week because a lot of them are kind of like middle-aged, they've all got jobs and things like that, so they didn't come every week.
Okay.
It kind of varied.
The reason why I've asked this question again, to all the listeners who probably feel like, I'm repeating the same thing, is to establish the fact that whether we live in Leicester, Bolton, Birmingham, Derby, it doesn't matter. The fact is that the sport fencing, which Rumana explained is a combat sport, does not have enough females there in that sport. And is that because people are not aware that it's a sport that us females can do, or whether it's just not of interest? Because I did read somewhere, and please don't quote me on this, but I did read somewhere, martial arts in the form of karate and kickboxing appeals more to the females than any other kind of contact sport. And it was quite interesting, but unfortunately I then got distracted and didn't finish the article, which I really wish I did, but I might have to search for that again. So before you joined Zahra, we were talking about how fencing gives you discipline and focus, and Rumana was explaining how for her, because you have to analyse your opponent's next steps and you're always one step ahead. Can you then explain to me what fencing has brought for you in that element? Have you got that discipline and focus there as well?
Yeah, so it definitely does. It give you kind of discipline and focus, especially because with the sword that me and Rumana fight, foil, there's only a small area in which you can get points. So you definitely have to kind of slow things down, and it does make you think because it's a little bit slower one. The foil is because there's only a small area, so it does get you thinking. So it's quite good in that fact, and to meet people that I wouldn't normally see, and met new people. Of different backgrounds, so yeah.
So then in terms of your studies, because at the end of the day, a lot of people do sports purely for the fitness of it. Some people do for the brain power element of it. I don't do any sports, so I wouldn't be able to tell you why I would or wouldn't do it. It's just not something for me. But when it comes to you in your life and in your studies, how do you feel fencing has helped you in your studies? And I'm going to bring that back to Rumana because she's patiently being really quiet. So I'm going to bring that back to Rumana. So Rumana, for you, in terms of your fencing and the discipline and focus it's given you, how do you feel it's impacted in your studies and your daily life?
I think with my studies, definitely like specifically with my legal academic work, like presentations or even an essay, I just really structure, plan ahead, think about what I could do. And I think the discipline and focus that I got from fencing just allows me to kind of analyze my work, kind of think, oh, where am I going to go from here? Think ahead to where my essay should be, and then just write it. And it just really helps taking that step back and planning it before going straight into it.
Basically, it's not a wasted sport, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you can continue on in other aspects of your life. Zahra, is that how you feel as well for when you're fencing?
Yeah. So it's definitely helped in that aspect. I mean, I'm an audiologist, so I mean, it does kind of help you kind of take a step back, kind of look at so when I'm dealing with patients, look at the patient as a whole, look at their symptoms, their hearing loss, what kind of problems they're having, and then try and come up with a plan that will help them. So yeah, it's definitely helped.
Okay. So now you mentioned audiologist. Now I know what an audiologist is because you've sent me some background info and I had a quick read of it. But for our listeners, because up until you sent me your email, I did not know what an audiologist was. I'm quite naive in that respect. Do you want to explain to our listeners what that is?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know what audiology is. When I got to uni and I told people what I was studying, they'd always say, "What is that?" So I'm so used to explaining it. But it's basically hearing. So I test people's hearing. I look in their ears to fit hearing aids. So yeah, it's just working with people that have hearing loss.
Okay, so the skills that you would pick up in your job would help you in your fencing and vice versa.
Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So, I mean, because I don't do sports, it is difficult for me to say whether they are transferable skills. But I mean, for me as a motorbiker, I mean, I don't know if you know Zahra, but I ride a
I didn't know
motorbike.
that.
No, so I had a feeling you did. I ride a motorbike. My husband rides a
What?
motorbike. My 20-year-old son rides one, and my two other kids, they've got off-road motorbikes. But in Leicester, there's not that many places we could take the kids, so she's not really been on her bike for that long, and she's 12, and the other is 18. So yeah, we're a bit of a biker, a Hell's Angels
Oh, that's
kind of.
amazing.
Hell's Angels kind of family. But when I ride my motorbike, I know that because I'm quite short, I'm only 4'11", so I have to always anticipate where my feet are going to reach the ground, because the ground in Leicester, unfortunately, my producer's laughing in the background, the ground is not even, as people would know. And because the ground is not level, I don't know where my feet will flat foot. So I end up putting my foot down, and then the bike toppling over, and then me going down, and then my husband or the mates have to come running to grab me and grab the bike. But touch wood, alhamdulillah, it's been a while since that happened, because I finally found a bike that I can flat foot on. But it's always analysing, it's anticipation, and those skills have really helped me in my day job as a solicitor. So it's really interesting to know about how you feel in your sport and how it's helped you. So for those listeners out there who are probably thinking actually it's probably a waste of your time, or it's not worth it, what are you going to gain out of it? Well, listen to these two young ladies who are saying that they've managed to succeed in that sport as being, probably the only females so far in their club. And not only have they succeeded, but they've been able to implement the skills that they've learned and transfer it into their day lives, their day jobs and their social lives and that. So it's probably something worth looking into. Now I'm going to move on. Now, this is Ramadan FM, although, Ramadan is over. But I was curious to know whether you fence in Ramadan, and if you do you do it whilst you're fasting?
I have. I have done it while fasting, but when it's in the summer, it's hard, because it's very hot under all that gear. So it is hard, but a lot of the times because it was in the evening, by the time I finished fencing and went home, it was iftari time, so it's fine. You go home straight away and then you can just chug loads of water. But yeah, it does get hot, so it is a bit hard. I didn't always go during Ramadan, because sometimes it's a bit hard, but no, I have done it before.
Okay, what about you, Rumana?
Yeah, fencing for me was like an all year round thing, so I didn't stop during Ramadan. It was a little harder, definitely, like with wanting water and just taking a few more breaks than usual. But once I had a competition in Ramadan, I think when I was like 15 or 16, I had this competition, and I really didn't want to do it because I was like, Dad, I'm going to be at a disadvantage. Like, should I really, really do it? And he's like, just come on, you can do it. You can focus. So I did, and at the end of it, I actually came out with a bronze medal, so I was really happy. And my dad, he had a massive platter of samosas ready for me for iftar time. So I was just chugging them down straight after the competition. I was like, yeah, I'm good.
MashaAllah, you know what? Kudos to your family and for that support that they give you. It's really, really, heartwarming to hear about the support that you ladies have. You mentioned about competition and you mentioned about fasting. I'm pretty sure there's a surah in the Quran Sharif or an ayat in the Quran Sharif, but it's just not coming to me. But I know that when you put your mind to something, the fasting is actually there to help you achieve as opposed to hinder your achievement. So the fact that you had that faith in knowing that even though you are fasting and you're doing this competition, you came out with, an award. And who knows what would have happened if you didn't fast or if you you left the competition. But I'm really pleased to hear that everything went well for you. Now, you mentioned competitions. Have you both done competitions for any of your clubs or unis?
Yeah, so at university, I represented the university in competitions. So I competed in something called BUCS, which is British Universities and Colleges Sport. So I went against different universities. So yeah, I competed then. After university, I did go back to my Birmingham Fencer Club, but then obviously COVID happened. So
Yeah.
it's kind of stopped since then. But yeah, I competed at university.
Sure. And what about you, Rumana?
Yes, I mostly competed at my derby club like quite a few times from the age of like 12 upwards. So every year they had a competition, so I just competed in that. And that was just like with one of the cities. So like once we had a competition with Nottingham or and their club, and once we had a competition with like I think it was like I think Westbury or something, just far up south. It was just random. And then I think I competed once at DMU as well. So yeah, for the same competition as our.
Wow, okay. So competitions must be a scary, nervous.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because I knew like some of the different universities. Because I started quite late. I was 15, and there's people that have been fencing like from a very young age, and they're the same age as me. So that did kind of that would kind of worry me at first.
Bless you. So are there levels then? Levels of fencing, like beginner, intermediate?
Yeah, yeah. So there are kind of levels. Yeah. So you have different levels, like you said, beginner, intermediate, that kind of thing.
So when I was doing my research into fencing, because I always had an idea of Rumana coming onto my show. No offense, Sarah, it's the first time I've met you today, but I know Rumana because she is my mentee and I've known about her fencing. When I did a little bit of research and digging into the show, I came across Ibtihaj Muhammad. Now, I've seen Ibtihaj on I think some adverts and posters. I just never knew who she was, other than the fact that she's done some groundbreaking stuff. But she was and probably still is the first American Muslim to wear the Islamic head covering whilst competing, and then going on to win a medal in the Olympics. Right. So now that I know that actually women can go pro, Muslim females can go pro. Have you ever thought about going pro in the sport? Rumana?
So I've actually never thought of going pro. However, I did really, really want to carry it on as a hobby for me. So I've watched Imtiaz Muhammad a few times and on the TV during the Olympics, and she's just a great saber fencer. So she plays the second sword that I mentioned before. The one that I said looks like the Three Musketeers fencing, so like with the slashing motion. So I think that's just the easiest way to describe it. And yeah, she's just an amazing fencer, really, really fast. And so yeah, fencing's just always been a great hobby for me. I think I'll definitely carry it on, but I've never just thought of going pro. But yeah, I'll definitely carry it on.
MashaAllah. Well, I wish you all the best in whatever you choose to do with your fencing and with your next achievements. What about you, Zahra? Have you ever thought about going pro or taking it further than your university competition?
So yeah, like Romana said, I haven't really thought about going pro, but I do want to carry it on as a hobby. I think I do want to try doing competitions as well outside of university ones, and maybe try some competitions with the Birmingham Fencing Club. I haven't seen a full match of Ibtihaj Muhammad, but I've seen a few clips of her fencing, and it is nice to see a Muslim woman fencing. So yeah, that's nice. And yeah, she does Saber, which is one that my younger brother does. So it is a lot of slashing and it's very fast paced.
Wow. So there must be a lot of footwork involved in that. Is there a lot of footwork involved with the weapon that you use? I believe you said it was foil.
Yeah, there is some footwork. It's very similar to Saber, but with foil, you're just a little bit more slow paced. And with Saber, the way you kind of start your attack is by moves. Whoever moves first, they've kind of got the attack. Whereas with foil, it's whoever extends their arm first.
Okay.
So that's why with Saber, as soon as they can go, they just run. Whereas foil, we tend to be a bit more slower paced. But yeah, footwork is definitely
definitely.
So interesting comparisons there. Now, we mentioned about, we have mentioned earlier, me and Rumana did talk about, whether there would be clubs around Derby and Leicester. And I keep forgetting that Rumana is from Derby and not from Leicester. But because she studies in Leicester, I blame you, Rumana, for my memory lapse in that. But I'm sure there are people out there, young and old, men or female, who are probably wondering how they can get into the sport. But Zahra, you mentioned that you started fencing quite late in life. You said you were 15. Rumana said she was quite young when she started. Is there an age cap on this, or can you be my age and almost 39 and start fencing if I wanted to?
Well, there's no age cap. You can start at any age. We had people at University UK and we'd never done it before, and they decided to come just to try it out. There's definitely no age cap. And the one when I was doing it with adults, there's people that have been doing it for a long time, and there's people who haven't. So yeah, you can definitely start at any age.
Okay, perfect.
I was just going to say that it is a little bit hard on the knees just because your on guard stance is kind of like always bending.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a weird position. It's always
Yeah.
bending, so it is a little bit hard on your knees. So maybe if you're a little bit older and your knees are a little bit weaker, it might be a little bit stronger on your knees and just hurt them a little bit more. But yeah, definitely, as Zara said, any age, kind of, yeah, you can start because all clubs are really friendly and they're just looking for more people to join and just getting involved with sport. So yeah, definitely any age.
So that's me out of the league then, because forget my knees, my back's completely gone as well. So I don't think I can do that anymore. In terms of cost of the sport itself, is it an expensive sport? And the reason why I ask that is, for example, my motorbiking itself, it can become really expensive if I choose to, if I go for all the fancy gear and all the, high-end stuff that I might want to wear, or even the bikes that are available to purchase. And I have spent quite a fair bit on my bikes and my gear and stuff. It's not just about riding the bike. You want to be comfortable and you want to look good as well doing it, especially with 4'11" and all the chubbiness surrounding my stomach areas and everything. But in terms of the sport itself, is it an expensive sport when it comes to purchasing the gear and the weapon?
For me, I think this really depends on whether you want to use your own equipment or not, or if you want to go pro. For example, buying your own equipment is really expensive. Like it'll cost you, I think, in the hundreds just for a decent mask, maybe glove, and then the sword as well. Never mind all the other actually jackets you have to wear. However, if you don't mind using the club equipment, and many clubs will actually provide equipment like the jackets, the sword, the mask, the gloves, and then it's a lot cheaper. All you really have to do is pay the club's fee and insurance, and sometimes even the club's fee includes the insurance, so it's not really expensive at all.
Okay, so now with COVID, have you any idea as to how that's going to progress forward in terms of wearing the gear that the club provides?
I think what I would say is they would probably.
Go on. I almost lost you there, so
You
there was
guys
a bit of a lag in your internet. So sorry, can you start that bit again?
Okay. I would say I think they would just clean their equipment after each session, shall we say, and just make sure it's clean, sanitized, or just make sure they clean it really thoroughly after each session. I think they wouldn't make you wear the same equipment as someone else had the previous session. They'd always clean it. I'm guessing now more often than before.
Okay, so basically same.
Yeah.
Nothing much has changed there. Okay, now I know you two, both ladies, are going to be biased with this answer, but I'm going to ask for the sake of asking, is it worth it?
Zara, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I was going to say,
think-
Zara, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so definitely it's definitely worth it. It's a good form of exercise. Because like you, I didn't really used to do any sports or any kind of exercise. So I think that's one of the reasons why my mum was very encouraging, because she was happy that I was doing some form of exercise. But yeah, it's definitely worth it. You get to meet new people, get some exercise, and you get to learn some new skills.
And what about you, Rumana? Bearing in mind all your friends and family are going to be listening to this.
I think it's definitely fencing has just taught me so much skills, like Zara said, and it's just an amazing and unique sport to play. So definitely worth it. I would definitely encourage anyone who's thinking about it to give it a try. Honestly, it's just one of the greatest sports, I think.
Brilliant. Alhamdulillah, I'm really pleased to hear that. Now, we do have about 6 minutes left before we are signing off. So I do want to ask each of you, and I'm going to start off with you, Rumana, on this one. What tips do you have for aspiring fencers out there? Golden nuggets, any words of wisdom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've got a few tips for you. So the first one would be just be open-minded and don't give up. And perseverance is definitely key with a new sport. So you will get hit a few times, obviously. That's what the sport entails, but just keep persevering. And I think my main tip, this is for tall people, or even if you're just taller than your opponent. So if you're tall, you have a very big advantage. So my brother had never fenced before, right? And when we got to university, I asked him to come with me to training and try. I think Zara will remember this as well. He was just fumbling all over the place. He's a 6'2" giant, so he's never fenced before. And when we started fencing, as I had done it for a while, I was just using the most complicated sword movements to intimidate him, as well as just walking towards him. I made him go all the way back and hit the wall sometimes. I think Zara remembers this as well. And the student coach at the time used to just always see this and laugh. And then I think he once said to my brother, Kasim, come on, she's half your size. Just stick your arm out and she won't be able to get anywhere near you. And that is just definitely true. And he didn't realize this. And when he did realize this, he just kept on sticking his arm out, and I couldn't get anywhere near him because of how tall he is. And obviously, I wasn't about to tell him that. And once he learned it, yeah, I just couldn't get an inch wise in anywhere.
Do you know what? That was brilliant, because what she was saying, that I literally had a picture of your brother, 6 foot something, holding his hand down. That's brilliant sibling rivalry just there. Fantastic. How about you, Zara?
Yeah. So kind of the same kind of thing. And like I would say, like don't hold back either, because I was quite nervous to start with, and I think I was worried about like hurting someone. But you got so much gear on, like you're not really going to feel it that much anyway. So like kind of don't hold back. But yeah, perseverance definitely, because it takes time to kind of get used to it, and you're learning all the different kind of sword movements and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, definitely some perseverance.
I was gonna say one more thing about Zara. So she's a left-handed fencer, which is a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Oh, that clicked to me. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, obviously being left-handed, the sword's on the other side, and people are mostly used to fencing right-handers. So that's definitely a bit of an advantage. So if you're left-handed, you already got an advantage. people aren't used to it. So yeah, they definitely find it a little bit more difficult, and the kind of sword movements, they're used to doing it against a right-hander, not a left-hander.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely gives you a bit of an advantage.
So I think I got used to the left-handed movement because of Zara. Like that's the only reason I could fence a left-hander, because I fenced Zara so often. I think I was better at left-handers than right-handers, which is, a bit.
Wow. So
I think
would you put one hand behind? I mean, I don't know if you can see me, but do you put like one hand behind and then one hand on the sword in order to do it, or am I just completely thinking of Zorro here now?
Go on, Zara.
you can do that. Some people like to do that just so it's out of the way, and that way it doesn't get hit, which shouldn't really, because on the other side, but sometimes it can get hit. Or you can just have it on the side. I tend to just have it on the side.
Okay, interesting. And I take it that you've got a rubber tip or something at the end of the weapon, so you're not actually cutting anyone up. I think that's really important, and I should have probably highlighted that right at the beginning. I mean, when I was growing up and I saw these movies with the fencing, I always thought, okay, they're going to get slashed now. And I think it was until I must have hit my teens or something when I saw like a rubber tip at the end of one of the weapons, and I thought, oh, that's how it works, when you're like growing up and stuff. So we actually do have a question. So thank you very much, Sophie Cara, for your question. Is the sword heavy, and does that then require upper body strength?
Foil is not a very heavy sword. However, Saber and epee are slightly heavier because of the guards. You'll see each different sword has a different guard, and foil is quite a thin and lightweight sword. However, I have to say, I think Zara can back me up on this. Over time, once you're fencing for a good 5 to 10, 20 minutes, the arm gets heavier regardless, because you're holding something. So it does require a tiny bit of strength in your arm.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The other two swords are definitely a bit heavier. I say especially the epee one's a bit heavier, because they've got bigger guards. Foil doesn't have that much of a bigger guard, so it's quite light. But you don't need massive amounts of upper body strength. I don't have much upper body strength, so yeah, it's fine. You don't need that.
You do look quite petite next to me. I could probably eat you alive if you were to stand next to me when it came to something like that. Now, for the listeners out there, thank you so much, Sophie Cara, for that question. So there are 3 different weapons. And for this weapon, which is foil, you don't need that much upper body strength, but somewhat is required. Now, one last question. I don't know if it's going to be my last question, but one question. In terms of the sport itself, now we see people in the streets playing football, and you can play cricket and things like that. Is fencing a sport that you can see people playing outside? Because I've never seen them, but Rumana did mention that she's often combated with you, Zara. So is it a sport that you'd probably play in your garden, or do you need some kind of special license?
I think you could do if you had an opponent with the right equipment. So if let's say Zara came to Derby one day, because I know she has the equipment and so do I'm guessing we could fence in our garden.
Yeah, if you had the equipment, then yeah, you could.
Yeah, but if you don't, then it is a little bit difficult. Maybe unless you want to grab a broom and start doing it with that.
Yeah, and use the spiky edges bit rather than anything else. Fantastic. Well, do you know what, ladies? It's been absolutely wonderful having you both on the show. And I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, Rumana and Zahra, for coming on. I really wish we had more time. I'm pretty sure the listeners are probably glad that it's coming to an end now. Seeing that my voice is not exactly the most soothing of them all. But what I do want to say is thank you so much to all the listeners for tuning in. Thank you to the team at Ramadan FM for making this show happen. And what I do want to say is please don't forget that the show Breaking Stereotypes is on the app that will be played regularly. So do tune in if you've missed it today or didn't get a chance to listen to it all. And do tune again next month. And also tune in Law in Action this Wednesday with Barrister Sultana Tafadar.